Hello everybody, and welcome to my new series, Workshop on Wheels. This will be my new short-form series to help you get the content you want delivered right to your home without having to wait nearly a year for me to make one of my longer videos. These aren't replacing my main long-form videos, but rather are made alongside them. Here you'll get my lighter thoughts on what I've been playing, watching, or reading, usually taken from my backlogged or letterboxed pages. If you enjoy my form of artistic analysis and criticism, I hope you can find something to enjoy here. Today, we'll be taking a look at 3 very different games in this inauguration episode. id Software's Rage, directed by Tim Willits, Human Entertainment's Clock Tower, directed by Hifumi Kono, and Sega AM1's The House of the Dead, directed by Takashi Oda. This will be a spoiler-free video, so feel free to enjoy to your heart's content. With that being said, let's just get right into the video. id Software is a studio you can expect 2 things from, predominantly fantastic graphics and fantastic gunplay. For these 2 elements to stand out in quality as much as they do, they prevent Rage, directed by Doom 3 designer Tim Willits, from falling into the spectrum of pure mediocrity occupied by titles like Homefront. Likewise, what prevents Rage from the greatness of its forefathers is its complete lack of identity, something only furthered by its later sequel. Rage pulls from a variety of elements: George Miller's Mad Max films, pulpy comic books, and even genre contemporaries such as the Fallout franchise and Borderlands, but never manages to bring them into a cohesive whole. Does Rage wish to be taken seriously, with a dramatic storyline and determined main cast, or seen as fun escapism with silly bandits and comical vendors? The art direction, the focus of id Tech 5's prodigal megatexture innovations, can be at times unremarkable and at times striking, and alternates between the 2 rapidly. It's hard to say Wellspring is a particularly iconic or memorable locale, but the gore-infested chutes and ladders of the Dead City and the intricate, often gobsmackingly handcrafted texture work lend a sense of awe that other 7th-generation games often cannot achieve. Megatextures may have their obvious impracticalities, grainy image quality, ballooned file sizes, lack of normal mapping, and other modern niceties, but give Rage a uniquely deliberate look that other titles struggle with. If only it were used on something more creative. I've seen these dusted roads, redneck tech settlements, and cyberpunk corridors in countless other games. The animation direction is weirdly Japanese, too. Characters animate incredibly fluidly, and can often be one of the most impressive parts of the game. Characters who otherwise have 0 personality gain a modicum from how they look when speaking to you. Bandits and mutants will flinch and stumble realistically when shot in the legs as they leap through the environment with a shocking amount of nuance. It's all clearly work with hours upon hours put into it, but solid craft is only half the pie here, and lack of ingenuity spoils the pot. Beyond tone and style, this also applies to the game design. As one might expect from an id game, it feels mighty fine to shoot things. From the punchy pistol to an assault rifle that feels like it's shooting unrefined rebar, enemies are torn to shreds in front of you. Regenerating health be damned, these moments are phenomenal fun, and that's why I have a degree of fondness for it. id would never return to this strange hybrid of retro sensibilities and modern military smoothness. Even Rage 2 takes clear inspiration from Doom 2016. Of course, none of this can compete with the pure majesty that is the wing stick. When Lusum hands you that spinning death stick, the combination of usefulness, sound design, and free-flowing power emphasizes what Rage could have been in id's traditional format. Unfortunately, great gunplay is tacked onto one of the most boring, quote-unquote, open worlds made manifest in the entire art form. You drive from location to location with nary a thing to participate in outside of car battles, which aren't even particularly fun, and otherwise mandatory locations. One can only gawk at the high-resolution skybox for so long before you wish the game had fast travel, as the act of traversing this deadly wasteland is rote instead of dangerous. You're given a little bit of variety here and there, such as racing tournaments and Mutant Bash TV, but you're not given much incentive to continue past what Willits mandates. I would have enjoyed another Mutant Bash level even, but once you're finished with its single course, there's nothing else. Every single aspect of this game's modern embellishments, from the exploration, side quests, etc., is so unfathomably dull and half-assed that Rage touches pure monotony at its worst. One only wishes that id stuck to their guns, no pun intended, as those moments are where the game shines. But ever since Quake 2, id has debatably waxed poetic with narrative ambitions. Written by Matthew J. Costello of Doom 3, The Seventh Guest, and Resident Evil 4 Remake fame, Costello doesn't do much to fill Rage's world. The only somewhat memorable characters are not due to the script, but rather external elements such as Neil Ross's convincing performance as Dr. Kvasir, or Lusum Hagar just being the game's attractive poster girl. The narrative's self-seriousness clashes with the attempted quirkiness of Willits' direction, and is the primary cause of the strange tonal clashes. Rage being serious is not a problem, neither is Rage being silly. If handled well, neither is a compelling mixture of the two. But as I illustrated earlier, Rage knows not what it wishes. The lack of significant world-building flourishes akin to Costello's previous work on Doom 3 hurt it further. As surface level as Doom 3's world setting could be, it still entrenched you within its world through readable PDAs and System Shock-style audio logs. Rage has no such thing. It expects you to be compelled by its paper-thin narrative while offering no characters, no world, and a bare minimum post-apocalyptic plot. One has to wonder what Costello's vision was for Rage's setting and plot. Doom 3's novelization contains some key differences from id's final game, but Rage's novel, written by Costello himself, features character deaths, important setting details, and plot points that recharacterize Rage's world in ways completely disparate from the source material. One gets the impression that Costello and id may have clashed with Rage's narrative goals as a result. Rage being above average, superior to the bargain bin modern military shooter slop of the 7th gen, is frankly a testament to its strengths, given how downright dull and underbaked its flaws are. I have a weird fondness for this one, even as it remains the worst of id Software's first-person shooters. Having been obsessed with it in high school, and souring on it over the years, it's very hard to hate Rage, or even write it off in any capacity. The environmental art, technology, as flawed as it may be, and gunplay are fantastic, yet every attempt at trend chasing falls flat on its face, with a story filled with tonal clashes within its paper-thin ambitions. It's hard to recommend to most, but for any id Software diehard, it may fascinate and disappoint in equal measure. I'd give this one a 6 out of 10. I enjoy light gun shooters. More than I should, maybe. For a genre so often considered mere quarter munchers for the frothing masses, there's just something primally satisfying about a good light gun shooter that cannot be found anywhere else. Nowadays, though, part of this is nostalgia, of course. Time Crisis 4 and The House of the Dead 2 were staples of my local mall's pizza joint. Nowadays, though, I find the concept of a 45-minute long game based around twitch shooting, reaction times, replayability, and flashy aesthetics rather novel in an era of games demanding increasing amounts of your time, although it goes without saying that those are often valuable experiences too. Takashi Oda's The House of the Dead, developed by Sega AM1, ran hand in hand with Capcom's Resident Evil in establishing zombies as de facto cannon fodder in video games alongside Nazis, demons, and aliens. games. I'll admit I've never played a real copy of The House of the Dead. The House of the Dead 2, 3, and occasionally even 4 could regularly be spotted in my local arcade joints, but never Sega's original. In this case, I emulated the original arcade version, and while incredibly spot on regarding technical accuracy and featuring many enhancements like higher rendering resolutions, it will never quite replicate the experience of holding a light gun in your hand. The haptic feedback, the rumbles of death, and the need to reload by aiming away from the cabinet are all key parts to the tactile experience. Playing with a mouse, while still rather fun, is unfortunately not quite the same. Unlike most other mediums, gaming is strongly dependent on the hardware you're playing on, and while for most games it can be overlooked or even in some cases argued against, The House of the Dead is simply not one of them. That being said, even a mouse can turn a zombie's unsightly skull into red mist. The House of the Dead, in any form, feels snappy as hell. Tight reaction times are demanded lest the living dead rip you a new face. This is not a game you can soak in the atmosphere, but rather, one must let it blow past you. The screaming hordes won't wait for you to feel immersed. Branching paths enhance replayability. While you'll eventually see all the game has to offer, it will take a few different runs. At the time, you were unlikely to go to the arcade daily, so the precious time you got in front of the cathode ray glow meant it always felt fresh. Otherwise, the game design and moment-to-moment feel is much what you'd expect from the genre, although Sega's innovation here could be considered how fluid it feels. While The House of the Dead owes much to Namco's Time Crisis, stacked up next to one another, Sega's title feels smoother, tighter, and more white-knuckle than the cover shooter. Unfortunately, as with many shooters around the time, the House of the Dead can be rather cheap. While the boss fights are often interesting and creative, the game isn't generous enough with invincibility frames, leading to moments where your bullets ping fruitlessly off of them without any real merit. Nowadays, this isn't much of an issue, as we can pretend to insert as many virtual quarters as one desires. A childhood Cretin would melt at that idea, but playing a cabinet without free play enabled will lead to frustration when you're losing real money due to occasionally cheap design. The House of the Dead's main accomplishment, however, is tone and style. This was before consoles had caught up with the raw power of custom arcade hardware, so each mutilated monstrosity came screaming through the 480p picture at 60 frames per second. Environments are as detailed as 3D graphics were capable of rendering at such frame rates. While a technical monstrosity for its time, The House of the Dead's gothic art direction and copious amounts of gore won the hearts of many an arcade goer. There's not a ton of consistency. Why are there so many lumberjack chainsaw zombies in a scientific mansion after all? But these monsters have become so iconic that it doesn't terribly matter. Bosses themed after major arcana tarot cards and sexual sadism, although much of the latter was cut in fear of censorship, add an air of 1990s edge, but without feeling uninspired or kitsch. Chariot remains one of my favorite creature designs in gaming. His vaguely sexual Chernobyl survivor outfit, his awkward crab-like movements, obscene vomiting through the gas mask, and broiled skin are eerily memorable in the best possible way, all backed by an extremely memorable score from Tetsuya Kawauchi. Atmospheric synth pads, reminiscent of floating through white space, crushed down with grinding guitars, pounding percussion, demonic organs, and a bass line that makes you want to get up and dance. It's a bit odd given the game's tone. Portions of The House of the Dead 2, also scored by Kawauchi, would pivot to be far more horror-themed musically in some respects, but I wouldn't have it any other way. It would not be at all unfair to say Oda and his team at Sega achieved something truly special here. The House of the Dead as a franchise strikes me as a sincere passion project, given Oda has directed all 5 mainline titles while allowing Western teams to experiment with spin-offs, at least in the case of The House of the Dead Overkill. While one could easily claim that light gun shooters such as this do not deserve to be held to the same degree as gaming's quote-unquote high art, looking at the amount of passion and effort put into the title, in addition to the emotions it can evoke makes this claim feel superficial and trite. I would give The House of the Dead an 8 out of 10. Console-exclusive point-and-click adventure games are rather uncommon, especially before the age of digital distribution. There is naturally an obvious reason for this, and while it's a shame console gamers would miss out on a variety of interesting experiences over the years, it's fairly understandable as to why. Despite this, Japanese console gamers managed to get one of the most interesting adventure games out there, a game that would become highly influential to the burgeoning survival horror subgenre, despite not being a survival horror game in and of itself. Hifumi Kono's Clock Tower, developed by Human Entertainment and initially released as a Super Famicom exclusive, is a fascinating game that feels ahead of its time. A strange blend of genres, Clock Tower mixes adventure games, cinematic platformers akin to Out of This World, and roguelites for a truly unique experience. The game is extremely short even by horror game standards, but each run is unique with randomized events, narrative beats, and item locations. This lends Clock Tower a sort of pick-up-and-play nature, which is odd for a horror game, but works remarkably well here, and thus justifies the later Bandai WonderSwan port. The puzzle design is a solid mix of obscure enough not to be trivial, yet still thoughtfully telegraphed. The player is challenged to pay attention to the environment as closely as they can, as the small brush of a curtain could give away the scissor man's position. In Pursuit, it can be slightly confusing as to which rooms will allow you to escape harm, but given that the game saves in every single room, it's a minor annoyance at most. That being said, as unique as Clock Tower's genre bending is, I don't feel its game design is what makes it so special. Clock Tower's atmosphere is absolutely dripping from the get-go, and stands tall with Nintendo's Super Metroid as a game that pushes the boundaries of what a Super Nintendo game could even be on an aesthetic and presentational level. Akiyoshi Ijima's careful art direction recalls Italian giallo films, especially those of Dario Argento. The Barrow's mansion is beautifully detailed, from every aristocratic room to its rancid, disgusting details. Many of these rooms feature thoughtful compositions, such as the mannequin room's combination of pillars, blue lighting, and posed figures. The most impressive aspect, however, is the game's breathtakingly fluid animation. Jennifer Simpson, our protagonist, animates with such stunning realism given the time period. Her clothes billowing as she runs, the deadly snap of the scissorman's shears, and the numerous bespoke environment interactions speak volumes to humans' commitment to a cinema-esque experience. The sound design and thoughtful implementation of Koji Nikura's eerie electronic score add to the creep factor. It was very common for games of this era to constantly blare music, whereas Clock Tower reserves it for key moments. Much of the game is completely silent aside from your echoed footsteps. If Clock Tower is style over substance, consider me completely on board. However, style over substance is certainly the name of the game here, at least in regards to the game's rather weak narrative. While I concede that the game's semi-randomly generated nature and very short length would be large obstacles towards telling an engaging story, Clock Tower's writing is remarkably thin at best. The overall vibes of the story and world setting are on point, but many moments intended to be emotional do not land as intended due to the lack of any real narrative setup or development. Story beats merely happen as they're needed, and the narrative comes and goes as it pleases. The only thing I'll levy praise towards in this department is the variety of different scenarios that can play out and the game's whopping 9 endings, depending on the player's actions and exploration, which give the game a ton of replay value. Kono's Clock Tower remains one of the shining jewels of the Super Famicom's library, while its Japanese exclusive status for nearly 3 decades, only recently getting an official English localization, has prevented it from getting the same recognition as the Super Nintendo's many classics. Clock Tower is a bit more famous than a mere cult classic, and its influence on the horror genre mark it as a remarkable stepping stone that remains impressive, tense, atmospheric, and fun even to this day. It's no wonder this franchise has such a following, given how strong its first entry is. Despite the varying receptions to its sequels, I have given most of them a chance, to mixed results, but perhaps I'll talk about that in another day. For now, I'd give Clock Tower an 8 out of 10. Today, we took a look at 3 very different titles: an early 2010s FPS from a legendary developer gone somewhat awry, a classic light gun shooter that took the world by storm, and a cult classic adventure game that forever changed the world of horror. These games may be very different from one another, but they are no less interesting despite their peaks and valleys. I hope you enjoyed this inaugural episode and look forward to more. If you liked the video, of course, please subscribe, like, and share, and please look forward to both my long-form videos and my short-form videos. Thank you very much, and have a lovely day.